Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Security Shorts with Scott. Very excited to have Mr. Kevin Lancaster with us today. He is the CEO of the Channel Program. Kevin, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. Thanks for reciprocating. I know you're on mine a couple weeks ago and appreciate being on yours.
Yeah, well, I wanted to get you on here because the topic of MSPs comes up a lot. And it's one of those terms that's been in the industry for a long, long time, and a lot of things have changed. And I was excited to get you back or get you onto mine so that we talk about that. But before we do that, we always like to start with just a little bit of an intro about yourself. So, Kevin, how'd you get into the business, and what have you sort of learned along the way?
Gosh, what have I learned? A lot longer, all the do's and don'ts. But I got into kind of the security, the MSP space just by default. I owned a consulting firm in DC. We were primarily public sector focused, and so we helped a lot of companies get into the government kind of procurement space, help them with their contract vehicles, and then at some point, we transitioned and got our own GSA schedules, and we're up on different, contract vehicles, that whole public sector game, and end up supporting a lot of civilian agencies with network management platforms. So we kind of morphed from just a straight consulting firm into, an IT services MSSP, probably around the 2005 timeframe, reselling 75 different vendors to public sector customers. So I've been at that for quite a while. It's hard to believe it's almost 20 years or so, but it's definitely changed over the years for sure.
Well, I'm glad you tee up the next topic then. Obviously, most people are probably familiar with the concept of an MSP, managed service provider. And to be overly simplistic, to keep it tight, is this all started from the fact that a lot of companies out there needed support with IT. This could be really basics like ordering laptops or setting up email or help desk and troubleshooting. But as you mentioned, a lot of things have changed. What's sort of happening in the MSP industry right now? And what are, when you think about your customers, where's their mindset when it comes to delivering services as an MSP?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest changes over the years is that go back to the early 2000s. Most IT services companies, or at that point, they were kind of starting to be called MSPs, but most of them were really kind of break fix, right? Or they worked with the customer, they're in and out, they got them up and running and kind of check back, and then it was probably around mid 2000s where you started to get into these recurring revenue business models. So I think they understood that it's not just setting up somebody's network or computer or set up a firewall. It's you have to be there proactively to support that. So I think that was kind of the genesis of the evolution into what we have now is called the MSP or even the MSSP marketplace. But I think along the way these organizations have matured quite significantly where often as it happens, MSP is started by an individual. Maybe they gotten laid off from their employer, or maybe they just had that itch to go step out the ledge. They start their business, they're technical, they're not really necessarily business savvy, and then they have to learn business savvy, and then they have to keep up with all the security requirements as they accelerate. And so, luckily, this industry has been, relatively well defined for the last, 15 to, 20 years. And these MSPs are maturing, and it's not just from a recurring revenue model, but they're starting to mature just in their security acumen, which is, honestly, it's long overdue because at the rate of security attacks and the evolution of that, and preaching to the choir, it just gets more and more accelerated. And so it's the positive is that industry is maturing, but it's always they got to keep up with the bad guys, right?
That's right. That is right. Well, when it comes to vendors, and I do want to talk about MSP and MSSP, but before we get to that, when it comes to vendor relationships with MSPs, what do you see as sort of best practices? So for those of the people that listen that may work for a vendor, what do they need to know about working with MSPs in today's world?
Yeah, I think what we see often are two different approaches, maybe with two different angles. We see a lot of vendors that are coming down from enterprise because they're realizing how mature this marketplace is now, where typically in the past they wouldn't have even thought about kind of getting into this fragmented MSP marketplace. Everyone was really happy with enterprise pricing and margins and stuff like that. One of the big issues that occurs with a lot of these vendors that come downstream is that they don't understand the concept of multi-tenancy. They don't understand really, the true concept of enablement. And I think more broadly speaking, I think where a lot of vendors struggle because there's product parity out there for just really the straight product companies. Often it's really hard to differentiate, but where vendors struggle is their ability to lean in and enable their partners, right? The MSPs are maturing, MSSPs are maturing, but they still need hand holding. They need to understand how to position products, position services. They need to how to present, and so I think that's one of the big challenges that vendors that still struggle with is how do they really connect and enable their partners in an area where there is a lot of product parity and it's really hard to differentiate.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Having built quite a few programs for MSPs and MSSPs, the thing that most of the enterprise companies don't understand from a product standpoint is the product needs to be enabled to be consumed multi-tenant, and it needs to be able to be consumed in a SaaS model, meaning pay on demand. So in a perfect world, the MSP wants to be able to turn up a license on demand and just have that be counted in arrears. The endpoint companies tend to be pretty good at this. A lot of the legacy infrastructure companies don't tend to be very good at this, and it leads to a little bit of a challenge. But if you can nail those two pieces, it makes operations and the CFO happy for MSPs, and obviously that will get you a long way. Kevin, let's talk MSP versus MSSP. So managed security services provider. What we see is this blurring of what these two companies or these two nomenclatures do. What SolCyber is an MSSP technically, that's what we're called. Even that's the closest bucket, but we obviously do something different slightly. Sometimes it's great. Sometimes it leads to a lot of conflict out in the market. What's your view on sort of MSP versus MSSP, and how is that going to evolve over time?
Yeah. I think what needs to, and this is hard because, you have this, not third rail, but third dynamic, third paradigm or whatever. It's called marketing, right? Sales and marketing. MSS or MSP want to project themselves as MSSPs. But oftentimes there's a very clear line, there is this clear distinction between an MSP who's often, you mentioned, they're more about infrastructure. They're more about, email hosting, keeping the lights on, making sure, they're whizzing through trouble tickets or help desk tickets. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you've got the MSSP, which, by definition, managed security services provider. They tend to be a lot more sophisticated, and they're better well versed in the threat landscape and kind of really what they need to do to proactively secure their partners. And I think there's an interesting, and I always talk about this evolution and maturity models, but if you look at how this market came about and how the MSP was actually schooled over the last 10 years, they were taught to buy point product. They bought, this, I need to buy, an endpoint, solution. So I go out and buy, a VSA from a Kaseya or something like that. And then I need to buy this, backup solution, and I need to buy this. And then eventually, today, the average MSP's got 25 plus products in their stack. Right, we've got some within our channel program platform. They have 170, 180, and they inherit a lot of these products from acquisitions and stuff like that. But so the MSP was historically taught to buy these point products as they're going out to these events and buying the next shiny object and what have you. So that created a lot of friction within kind of the MSP market, because most of these products didn't talk to each other, and really wasn't this concept of a platform. And so I think we're starting to see the rise of platforms. We're starting to see, I think, a pretty clear distinction, minus the marketing fluff. We're seeing a pretty clear distinction between what really is a true MSP and how they go to market and how they're kind of more product centric versus, that the more sophisticated MSP and certainly the MSSP is thinking about, not just bundled solutions, but how do they offer this comprehensive, capability to their customer. So I think that's kind of how this has evolved.
Yeah, we see it a lot. We run into two types of MSPs out there. One that are offering MSSP services, but they're really, as we like to say, three guys in a box with a Fortis SIM, which, it's better than nothing, but it's not really going to stop really too many bad actors. And then what we're trying to see, and obviously make play, is the partnerships obviously between the MSSPs that focus on really high-end security, but in a way that's easy to consume, and partnering with the MSPs. And so it'll be curious to see if that continues to happen, or if we see the MSPs wanting to continue to drive more MSSP type services, take on that risk, for better, for worse, or if we see the partnerships continue to evolve.
If I can interject, I mean, I think it gets based on the data that we're seeing is I think they're getting smart about this because of vendor sprawl and because to your point. Well, I don't know. I kind of feel like that you get to the certain point where you're transitioning and maybe you're jumping in with both feet and becoming an MSSP, but oftentimes they realize what it takes to build. So you talk about the internal infrastructure, tool set, the sprawl. I mean, it's often very cost prohibitive to hire individuals internally and have that level of expertise. And so I think there's these concepts of hybrid IT, there's concepts of hybrid security. I think if I was gonna I don't know, forecast or speculate on what happens, in the future, I think most of the MSPs moving into the MSSP space, I think they're looking for outside solutions. I think they're looking for somebody that come in and integrate with their operations, but really take a lot of that lift off, because it is. I mean, that's that CapEx versus OpEx, equation that impacts it as well. So I think that's where this market's going.
I would definitely say from my side, I've seen a change in the last 6 to 9 months with more MSPs reaching out. As I think they're starting to realize that, sure, it's great to get the additional ARR revenue, but it comes at a cost. A cost from a risk standpoint, from a expense standpoint, from a maintenance standpoint, and even being able to win in the market, right? Getting 24/7 is hard. So you end up with these 8x5 type situations. So we'd love to partner with obviously more MSPs. So I'm excited about that trend. Kevin, last thing is, oh, go ahead.
If you mind, just interject real quick. I think one of the other interesting evolutions, we'll see whether this economy is a soft landing or hard landing. Some speculate still there's a recession on the horizon, but by the way, endpoint counts have slowed, right? Just overall, right? You had this really massive peak with COVID, and coming out of COVID, you had this wave, and the actual acceleration of endpoint counts has slowed a little bit. And that means that the MSP's margins are going to get squeezed, and they're going to have to look for smarter ways, especially, moving forward in security. They have to look for smarter ways. And I think that's another one of those arguments about that CapEx versus OpEx. I mean, I think, the partner model for the MSP, I think, is going to be a heck of a lot more advantageous for them moving forward, even if even if we have not just a soft landing, but then we take off in the market as well. So that's another thing to think about, really, from a margin standpoint.
It probably will be margin accretive, actually, if you get somebody like us, it's very margin accretive for them to use us. And they don't tend to think about it that way because, again, it's easy to think about building something. They're oftentimes that's the way they're sort of wired. But it tends to be very margin accretive.
Yeah.
Kevin, last thing. So you do this all day, every day. What should customers look for in an MSP? So if they were to come to you and ask for advice and say, hey, you obviously know them well, that's your whole business. What should they be looking for in getting their MSP?
There's kind of the usuals. You want to have high level of service or SLA. You want references. I think what's more important these days, and I think this is really business dependent, whether you're regulated or if you're in a specific vertical. I think finding an MSP that really understands your vertical or the challenges that you might have. And it's not to put down the auto body shop down the street, but the overall risk relative to a law firm or a financial organization or a GovCon or government contractor or what have you, government customer, that risk profile is a lot different. And I think the end user, as you're looking at these MSPs or MSSPs, they need to really understand what that customer or what that an MSP's customer portfolio looks like, and really is there a true match? Not just, hey, I can, I can sell you this, I can sell you that. Here's our, per monthly cost or whatever. I think the consumer's gotten a lot smarter, because they're doing a lot of research, and I think inevitably the small business organizations gotten a lot smarter because they're doing their research on the front end. So I think there has to be alignment, especially with these regulated organizations, the ones that have really an elevated security risk. And I think that's the way to approach it these days.
Yeah, verticalization probably makes a lot of sense, and I've even started running into that as well. As companies, as MSPs focus on specific, right? Healthcare is another big one. Obviously, government CMMC is coming on like a train, so it's going to make a lot of sense for companies and for customers to think about that. Does your MSP have a vertical specialization that helps?
Yeah.
Kevin, listen, I really appreciate it. Any final thoughts, and also where should people go to find you?
We're easy. It's channelprogram.com, or you can find me out on LinkedIn on the socials. It's just Kevin Lancaster Channel Program, and it's pretty easy.
Awesome. Well, Kevin, really appreciate you joining. Thanks for taking the time, and really look forward to working with you on more partnerships as we go forward. Thank you, sir.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.